I would like to give the floor to Jessica Zychowicz and her paper on cultural policy and art.
Thank you. It's good to be here. So, I have chosen to share with you today some images by the artists that I focus on in my paper, and also to contextualize them through my readings of their work and also some background of the context in which they're producing their art. Throughout my presentation, we'll go to the next slide. Oh, here it is. Thanks. I'm really focusing on urban space as a medium for aesthetic experiment. The artists that I'm going to focus on today are from the Visual Culture Research Center in Kiev, which was founded in 2008 as a platform for collaboration between academic, artistic, and activist communities. What's really fascinating about what's going on in their work is the sort of underlying political commentary which comes through the city and the spaces of Kiev, monuments, especially museums, and Soviet architecture and city planning that used to stand for the revolution and now are symbolizing other concepts and ideas for these artists and thinkers who are working with these textures as a kind of canvas, not making a for or against statement about the Soviet past, but rather opening up some spaces for dialogue. Here we have an installation from this summer, July 2016. This was the first material to go over the former Lenin statue in downtown Kiev, the pedestal still remaining there. This piece was created by a Mexican artist, Cynthia Gutierrez. 200 people submitted ideas for different installations to go over the pedestal, and her work was chosen. The art group responsible for this installation is Izolacja, which is actually from Donetsk originally, and currently they are based in Kiev for obvious reasons. What I really want to show you, though, about this piece is how it's operating in a political context. So basically looks like the pedestal is still under construction, but participants in the installation are, and they were invited to take photos of each other or of the view from the pedestal, climbing up the pedestal on their own. And what's fascinating is the way that these images circulated then through international social media and mass media, making sort of a meta commentary on the power of social media and the internet today. So in the space of the former totalitarian leader, we have now iPhones and social media, which can be both liberating in the sense that social media has helped activists organize around the world, but can also become a form of surveillance. So through the space of the city now, in that installation and in several others which I'm going to share with you, we have this question about media and its interaction with spaces. This cover here, the Book of Kiev, is from a biennale that happened, the first biennale to occur after the revolution in 2015, in which the Visual Culture Research Center organized about 100 events across the city of Kiev using different spaces like old factories, defunct even locations, old parks that had been forgotten about and not kept up, and they wrote a book about it. And in this book, there are lots of oral histories by these young individuals, largely in their 20s and 30s, who are part of the collective, and they're writing about their experiences of Maidan and also some of their parents' memories. So they are really kind of searching for a continuity of experiences between their own lives, their parents' lives, their grandparents' lives. And here I show you Lenin because we were just observing the pedestal and the installation, but this particular Lenin was inside the museum, and the artists in the collective during the revolution deposited it into the repository of the museum in order to save it from being destroyed, so it could be some kind of material for art in the future. Here's an image that came out of the exhibit Disputed Territory in 2014, just before the events on Maidan. Again, we see a repurposing of the past here, Lenin's head being used as a barricade next to a heart. I read this image as a commentary on the organs of the state and the repurposing of past ideologies for new purposes. So the next artist that I want to focus on in a little more detail is Yevgenia Belorusets. She's a photographer, and I compare her largely to Alexandra Rodchenko. I don't include her in my paper, but the reason I really want to share this with you is because, again, I want to return to this idea of continuity between generations. And her work in the VCRC, like many others, is largely about their coming of age in between the Orange Revolution and the events on Maidan. They also share, many of them, multilingual backgrounds, very educated, as compared oftentimes with their parents who did not have the opportunity to travel. These are people who have traveled around the world but are interested in Kiev and its legacy, its very rich legacy of visual culture and film. And here the Soviet giant of photography, Alexandra Rodchenko, is providing a language for emerging photographers to think about the city and architecture. Rodchenko was largely interested in depicting the communist future. And here we see Yevgenia Belorusets using his images and forms to comment on the past. Here, time has eroded the building's exterior. This was a former communal apartment that has been repurposed into a tenement home. She spent 3 years interviewing the women and other residents inside the tenement home and kept a blog about it. So she's giving voice to the inhabitants of these defunct Soviet spaces that have been largely rendered forgotten or unuseful by the march of progress. Yet she's asking us to think about the value of individuals in these spaces and how they live their lives. So she quotes them quite often, and here again you see the parallel of form between the two artists. The last artist I will get to today is Vlada Ralko, who is a painter. Oh, here we go. And these images here are largely about war and the peripheral spaces of war. So all of the images I've shown you today are largely peripheral experiences by marginalized individuals, women, LGBTQ individuals. Here we have almost an image of a woman's experience of war, not a necessarily a young or able-bodied individual who can join the fight or the effort, but an elderly woman standing on the margins of the Maidan looking at a fallen monument in front of her. So what I want to leave you with is not a solid conclusion on what all of these images mean or add up to, but I want to underline, which I get to in richer detail in my paper, the shift of institutions in the cultural sphere and the role of the museum in maybe providing a special space for dialogue about the nation and the past that can be useful for opening and extending opportunities to preserve both the legacy of visual culture in Kiev, but also to invite new possibilities and innovation. So that's the end of my presentation. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.